Good afternoon and welcome to Matters Financial and Geopolitical from a Frontier. I trust you had a great weekend. It's rather cold here in Nairobi at the moment. Let me start with macro thoughts. A very interesting article in the Financial Times. Global bond bull run has reached historic levels. I've written about this severally. The Wizard of Oz world, bond yields and tilt mode. The global bull run that started in 1985 is now one of the most intense in the debt market's 700-year history, comparable with the deleveraging and economic growth spurt that followed the Napoleonic Wars. Despite long-standing predictions of the end of the bond bull market that started after former Federal Reserve Chair Paul Volcker quashed inflation in the 1980s, government debt has kept rallying this year, taking the average annual fall in yields to 17.4 basis points over the past 34 years. That puts it on the cusp of surpassing the 1873 to 1909 bull run in length and makes it the strongest decline in long-term interest rates since 1817 to 1854. So you can see this is a real outlier when it comes to performance. Although more than $15 trillion worth of bonds now trade with negative yields, the fact that the world has seen comparable, if rare, falls in bond yields and the long-term nature of the decline since the 12th century casts doubts over suggestions that the global economy is experiencing something unprecedented, according to Mr. Schmelzing. Very interesting. I wrote about this in that article, which I said this is voodoo economics. We're in nosebleed territory. And I was saying just because we've not reached the point where the curtain was lifted as it was in The Wizard of Oz, and the wizard revealed to be an ordinary con man from Omaha who has been using elaborate magic tricks and props to make himself seem great and powerful, should not lull us into a false sense of security. Home Thought's incredible article I came across in the Times about Iggy Pop. I am a street-walking cheetah with a heart full of napalm. Think about that. Iggy Pop is naked from the waist up. His 72-year-old torso still has a sinewy muscularity, and his trousers are so low they seem vaguely obscene. His silvery blonde mane of hair is shoulder length and dead straight, and a wide, boyish grin breaks out whenever something amuses him, and turns into a snarl when it doesn't. The man who predated punk by a decade as leader of the Detroit garage legends, the Stooges, who may well have invented stage diving, and who came up with the immortal line, "I'm a street-walking cheetah with a heart full of napalm." That's just outstanding. Rock and roll has proved a harsh mistress. It is common knowledge that I've been living on one leg for a while. He does indeed have one leg much shorter than the other and walks with a rolling, tilting gait. I can't stage dive now because everything is held together with safety pins. There may be a time when I can't do rock and roll gigs anymore, which will kill me. But then I came up with some pretty bad osteoarthritis 30 years ago and thought, what the F am I going to do? I can't even walk across the room. I met this tough little Korean guy who taught me Tai Chi and Qigong, and after that I didn't want to smoke dope, I didn't want to smoke cigarettes, and I could keep touring. Now I drink like a Frenchman. Good wine with dinner at night. I go to bed early. And I live in Miami, which helps. You've got to read that article, it's super. Eleanor Carucci is a photographer. This photograph in the car, 2015, caught my attention. I think the subject matter of most photos in Carucci's series, Midlife, is unremarkable. A smudge of lipstick, the knuckles of a hand, a grey hair, a ripple of cellulite. What is unusual is the focus, the lips, photographed so closely that the hair on the upper lip appears wiry and thick, the knuckles wrinkled and mountainous, the grey hair lit against a black background spiralling upward to an impossible height, the rippled skin, tissue and fragile. Having spent a week in the hospital, kind of thinking about life, and these photographs really got my attention. It really did. Before man, congested scene around a watering hole in Savute, Botswana. This is probably one of my favorite photographs taken by David Yarrow. On National Wildlife Day, I wanted to share a new image. This is the right title for this congested scene around a watering hole in Savute, Botswana. I needed a vista that could offer depth, and the bank here was perfect. He's a great photographer. There's a fantastic documentary about lions and about that area, the Savute, on YouTube. Political reflections. Mr. Boris Johnson wrote to party members on Friday evening saying they just passed a law that would force me to beg Brussels for an extension to the Brexit deadline. This is something I will never do. Risks being taken to court if he fails to carry out the will of Parliament, and could be held in contempt or jailed if he refuses. Ian Duncan Smith, this is about Parliament versus the people. Boris Johnson is on the side of the people who voted to leave the EU. The people are sovereign because they elect Parliament, but Parliament wants to stop the will of the people. So it's an incredibly fluid situation. I think he's determined to get out, and I think the French are going to help him as well. And essentially, therefore, I think you stay short sterling. I think we're going to hit new lows below 120, considerably below before the recovery sets in. But you know, it remains a very fluid situation. Latest, this is interesting, voting intention poll from Opinion shows him performing very well, the Conservatives. Look at the numbers. YouGov for the Sunday Times shows the Conservatives at 35%, Labour at 21%. So basically, if we can consolidate that with the Brexit Party at 12%, puts it at 47%, which is going to be sufficient, which seems to me to be the strategy, and it's working from that perspective. 5th of August, when I wrote about Boris and Sterling, and I was looking back at 1992, which was an epochal time in my life. That's just when I got to the trading floor. And I asked, I said he's taken quite properly an impossible is nothing and can do political posture. But the bottom line is, can he swing it? And I think he can. Shihab Khan, I honestly have no words to describe this Twitter interaction and what British politics has become. This is calling the leader of the Labour Party a chicken and then tagging KFC. And I said, this tweet epitomizes Dominic Cummings's political edge, which is something to consider. They at KFC in an attempt to get a retreat from a kitchen shop, a real baller of a power move right there, said Jim M. Felton. But overall, I think that notwithstanding the noise, I think they're going to corner Parliament, which will be seen as not expressing the will of the people. I think there is sufficient support behind Boris, and politically speaking. Xi Jinping mentioned struggle 60 times in a speech. That's from Chi Girl. Took me back to May 2019, and quote, "If there is a decoupling between the two economies, so be it. The Chinese people can endure more pain than the spoiled and hubristic Americans." China strikes at Trump. That was my article on the 26th of August. Very interesting interview between J. Kyle Bass and Raoul GMI of Real Vision. Will a currency crisis bring down China? Kyle has been criticized for talking up his position, but have a look at this interview and make up your own mind. White House announces Jared Kushner's former coffee boy is the new Middle Eastern envoy. About sums it up. Fantastic article in Mint Press News by Whitney Webb. The CIA, Mossad, and the Epstein network is what she's writing about. It's well worth reading in full. It's a very detailed article. Not long after Epstein's arrest and his relationships and finances came under scrutiny, it was revealed that the Israeli company Carbine 911 had received substantial funding from Jeffrey Epstein, as well as Epstein's close associate and former Prime Minister of Israel, Ehud Barak, and Silicon Valley venture capitalist and prominent Trump backer Peter Thiel. Carbine is no ordinary tech company, as it is deeply connected to the elite Israeli military intelligence division Unit 8200, whose alumni often go on to create tech companies. Unit 8200 linked tech companies had previously received US government contracts to place backdoors into the US's entire telecommunications system, as well as into the popular products of major American tech companies, including Google, Microsoft, and Facebook, many of whose key managers and executives are now former Unit 8200 officers. Netanyahu has made it no secret that placing Unit 8200 members in top positions in multinational tech companies is a deliberate policy meant to ensure Israel's role as the dominant global cyber power. Another funder of Carbine, Peter Thiel, has his own company that, like Carbine, is set to profit from the Trump administration's proposed high-tech solutions to mass shootings. Indeed, after the recent shooting in El Paso, Texas, Trump, who received political donations from and has been advised by Thiel following his election, asked tech companies to detect mass shooters before they strike, a service already perfected by Thiel's company Palantir, which has developed pre-crime software already in use throughout the country. Means of tracking and flagging potential American dissidents for increased surveillance and detention in the event of a vaguely defined national emergency. Use advanced technology to identify neurobehavioral signs of someone headed toward a violent explosive act, using data collected by consumer electronic devices. Carbine 911 will be referred to simply as Carbine in this report. Began to be specifically marketed as a solution to mass shootings in the US, goes beyond the gun debate, improves the intelligence that armed emergency responders receive before entering an armed shooter situation by providing video streaming and acoustic input from civilian smartphones and other devices connected to the Carbine network. has already been implemented in several US counties and in Mexico, Ukraine, and Israel. Saying in addition to Barak's serving as Carbine's chairman, you have several other very influential Israeli ex-military intelligence type people. Unit 8200 is also known for spying on civilians in the occupied Palestinian territories for coercion purposes, gathering info for blackmail, and also for spying on Palestinian Americans via an intelligence sharing agreement with the NSA. Carbine also boasts several times with the Trump administration, Peter Thiel, Board of Advisors Trey Stevens, member of the Trump's transition team, Michael Chertoff, New York real estate developer Elliot Towell, alongside Barak and Bukras. For instance, Carbine's smartphone app extracts the following information from the phones on which it is installed: device location, video live stream from the smartphone to the call center, text messages in a two-way chat window, any data from a user's phone if they have the Carbine app and EasyNet, and any information that comes over a data link which Carbine opens in case the caller's voice link drops out. Human Rights Watch reverse engineered the app. The group discovered the app automatically profiles a user under 36 person types, including followers of 6 lines, which is the term used to identify Uyghurs. Another term refers to Hajj, the annual Islamic pilgrimage to Mecca. The app monitors every aspect of a user's life, including personal conversations and power usage, and tracks a user's movement. Such technology is currently used by Israeli military intelligence and Israel's domestic intelligence agency, Shin Bet, to justify pre-crime detentions of Palestinians in the occupied West Bank. As will be noted in greater detail later in this report, Palestinians' comments on social media are tracked by artificial intelligence algorithms that flag them for indefinite detention if they write social media posts that contain tripwire phrases such as the sword of Allah. Carbine's platform has its own pre-crime elements, such as its C records component, which stores and analyzes information on past calls and events that pass through its network. This information enables decision makers to accurately analyze the past and present behavior of their callers, react accordingly, and in time predict future patterns. One of Carbine's clearest connections to Israeli intelligence is through its chairman and one of its funders, Ehud Barak. Barak's relationship with Jeffrey Epstein. Barak had come under fire for his ties to disgraced film mogul Harvey Weinstein. Indeed, it was Ehud Barak who put Weinstein in contact with the Israeli private intelligence outfit Black Cube, which employs former Mossad agents and Israeli military intelligence operatives, as Weinstein sought to intimidate the women who had accused him of sexual assault and sexual harassment. Barak, a frequent visitor to Epstein's residences in New York, so often that the Daily Beast reported that numerous residents of an apartment building linked to Epstein had seen Barak in the building multiple times over the last few years. Epstein, who was known for his interest in obtaining blackmail through the sexual abuse of underage girls he exploited, also claimed to have damaging information on prominent figures in Silicon Valley, potentially damaging or embarrassing information. Said that these top figures in the American tech industry were hedonistic and regular users of recreational drugs. It's not clear if tech executives were potentially being blackmailed by Epstein. It is known that Epstein associated with several prominent tech executives, including Google co-founder Sergey Brin, Facebook co-founder Mark Zuckerberg, Tesla CEO Elon Musk, Microsoft co-founder Bill Gates, LinkedIn co-founder Reid Hoffman. Thiel, an early investor in Facebook, connecting him to Zuckerberg, a funder of Elon Musk's SpaceX, and a former colleague of Musk's through PayPal. Saying Thiel has ties to US intelligence and a history of investing in other companies founded by former members of Unit 8200. Palantir is also in demand for its pre-crime technology, which has been used by several US police departments. It's all done by using prediction. Business ties to Trump's son-in-law, Jared Kushner, as well as to Kushner's brother Josh. Thiel is immensely powerful within the administration through his connection to Jared. Talking about SUNC, an organization founded by Paul Singer, who's donated heavily to Trump and Netanyahu. SUNC has sought to integrate Unit 8200 connected Israeli tech startups into foreign companies. So quite a story. Beyond its troubling connections to Silicon Valley oligarchs, Israeli military intelligence, and the US military-industrial complex, Carbine's recent partnerships with two specific technology companies, Google and Cisco, raise even more red flags. So aligning its unified call manager with Carbine's call handling platform, allowing emergency call centers to collect data from both 9/11 callers and nearby government-owned IoT Internet of Things devices. A report on the partnership published by Government Technology magazine stated that Carbine's platform will be integrated into Cisco Kinetic for Cities, an IoT data platform that shares data across community infrastructure, smart city solutions, applications, connected devices. This is just incredible. Carbine platform will combine the data it obtains from smartphones and other Carbine connected devices with what's available through nearby Cisco connected road cameras, roadside sensors, smart street lamps, smart parking meters or other devices. Can also analyze data that's been collected by Cisco IoT devices and alert 9/11 automatically without any person making a phone call. Quite an extraordinary situation all round. It's saying that after the Vegas shooting, we were able to show that our system would have managed to identify the location of the shooter much quicker. Moving on, SUNC was founded as part of a deliberate Israeli government effort to counter the non-violent BDS movement and to make Israel a dominant global cyber power, which they probably are. Deliberate policy of Netanyahu's resulted in the creation of a Mossad-run venture capital fund that is specifically focused on financing Israeli tech startups. Israeli intelligence has a documented history in placing backdoors into technology products for the purpose of surveillance, with one well-known case being Israel's repurposing of the Promise software, discussed in part 3 of the Mint Press series on Jeffrey Epstein. The Promise software was what Robert Maxwell was selling. So it's just fascinating. Shin Bet is like an evolving startup with unmatched strength. Extol the agency's use of pre-crime technology to detain Palestinians based on their social media activity. Argaman at the time claimed that more than 2,000 Palestinians, whom he described as potential lone wolf terrorists, had been arrested as a result of these breakthrough technological advances that use artificial intelligence algorithms to monitor the social media accounts of Palestinians, especially young Palestinians, for the use of tripwire phrases that have been used by Palestinians who later committed acts of violence in the case of those who use such terms. Their phones are tracked to see if they meet other suspects or leave their districts to move towards potential Israeli targets. In such cases, security forces detain the suspect. Promise software, of course, was a factor in the Iran-Contra affair. A database of Americans who often for the slightest and most trivial reason are considered unfriendly and who in a time of panic might be incarcerated. The database can identify and locate perceived enemies of the state almost instantaneously. This secretive database has often been referred to as main core by government insiders, and most troubling of all, and still exists today. Journalist Chris Ketchum, citing senior government officials, has said main core is believed to contain the names of as many as 8 million Americans. Bill Hamilton, former NSA intelligence officer and the original creator of the Promise software, told Shorrock at the time that he believed the US intelligence uses Promise as the primary software for searching the main core database. And then there's some very murky stories as well. Main core serves a dual purpose. First is the mass targeted surveillance to crush dissent during times of national crisis, whether spontaneous or engineered, and second is a massive blackmail database used to keep every potential opponent in line during non-emergencies. You've heard that, right? Thiel set to profit handsomely from the Trump administration's plans to use its pre-crime technology, which is already used by police departments throughout the country. Palantir has obvious similarities to Promise, is already known to use its software to track potential terror threats, including domestic terror threats, and a category of people it refers to as subversives. Algorithms targeting Palestinians after Palantir opened a research and development center in Israel in 2013. In the wake of the El Paso Walmart shooting, Trump called on big tech companies to collaborate with the Justice Department in the creation of software that stops mass murders before they start. Will use data gathered from civilian electronic devices to identify neurobehavioral warning signs, thereby flagging potential shooters for increased surveillance and potentially detention. Anyone familiar with DARPA, such claims should immediately sound alarm bells, especially since DARPA is already developing its own solution to mental health issues in the form of a brain-machine interface as part of its N3 program. That program, according to reports, involves non-invasive and minutely invasive neural interfaces to both read and write into the brain, help distance soldiers from the emotional guilt of warfare by clouding their perception, and to program artificial memories of fear, desire, and experiences directly into the brain. N3 is intended to improve the prowess of American soldiers, also said to be used as a means of pursuing DARPA's systems-based neurotechnology for emerging therapies project. You can't make it up. This is the Palantir founder, Peter Thiel, listening to Trump during a meeting at Trump Tower in New York, December 2016. This is Elon Musk with Epstein's alleged Madam Ghislaine Maxwell at an Oscars after party on March the 2nd, 2014. This is Ehud Barak, posing with Carbine co-founders Alex Dizengoff, Amir Elichai, and Lital Leshem. And that took me back to the article I wrote about the 21st century real-time not only unfolds itself at the speed of light, but is full of mind-bending twists and turns. Jeffrey Epstein had a collection of eyeballs on his wall. The eyeballs make sense because Epstein was a watcher. Is it a coincidence that we all live in a watch and collect digital economy? Maybe, but we feast upon each other in the 21st century. According to the New York Times, it was not closely monitored. Epstein was a spy in a society of spies. He was a collector in a collector's economy. He was a watcher, and he died while nobody was watching. Then I took up Andrew Cowan's quote, "The millennials are looking at the world through their phone. Johnny Walker is way more aspirational than any other brown spirit in East Africa." The point was about looking at the world through the phone. I said the point is that the smartphone is ubiquitous, even in the furthest corners of the world, and we're all peering at a newsreel. Except, of course, if you're in Kashmir, which was described by Nehru as the snowy bosom of the Himalayas, and which is currently switched off from the 21st century. To went to the frontier from Xinjiang to Kashmir, from Gaza to Crimea, from Hong Kong to Taiwan, I said, are 21st century flashpoints, but they're being managed by what we've just been talking about. Xinjiang, the story China wants the world to forget. Very good Al Jazeera listening post. I said on the 19th of August, it is not possible to Xinjiang, Hong Kong, I think. And I said the citizens in Hong Kong have been virilliant. Whoever controls the territory possesses it. Possession of territory is not primarily about laws and contracts, but first and foremost a matter of movement and circulation. Yesterday I was reading a tweet by a comparativist who was saying, "This is fake news, Jack. This is an authoritarian state media harassing a 22-year-old kid who does not advocate independence. This is Joshua Wong Chi-fung, about whom XH News tweeted, leader of the Hong Kong political group advocating independence is taken away by police for breaching bail conditions as he is about to depart from Hong Kong International Airport." And I tweeted back to comparativists, the optics of a 22-year-old kid versus the jackpot are, in my view, unsurmountable. International markets, there was some disappointment with the non-farm payrolls number. It came in below expectations, but this caught my attention. US average hourly earnings rose 3.2% year on year in August. Estimate was for 3%, and that's the point. Payroll just rose 130,000, including 25,000 for the census. Northman Trader, the Fed is not managing the economy, the market is managing the Fed, which goes back to the point I made in July that this is indeed a quite incredible moment in monetary policy making, where the markets have led policymakers by the nose into a situation of voodoo economics, plain and simple. According to Yahoo Finance, Bitcoin is increasingly moving in an opposite direction to China's currency, suggesting it may have become a refuge for people hedging the renminbi's depreciation. The biggest digital coin reached a record inverse relationship in the past week, according to a Bloomberg analysis of that 30-day correlation, which goes back to something I wrote on the 27th of May when I said it's clear that directionally money wants to leave China, and a great deal of the 2019 surge in Bitcoin, I said, is surely correlated to Chinese capital flight. UK pound lost 122.60. I'm a seller. Currency returns versus the dollar. This is from Charlie Bilelo. Canadian dollar up 4%. Japanese yen up 3%. Swissy down 0.6%. Aussie minus 3%. Pound only down 3%. That's interesting. Real down 5%. Swedish krona was obviously the trade to put on. That is down. That Swedish krona is down a total of 8% year to date, which is far higher than I had expected, actually. That's why so much attention has been paid to the Swedish krona. I've kind of missed that trade. I'm still bullish on the dollar, as I have been all year. Then currency markets, euro, where we're expecting Draghi, but I think some people think the market is set for disappointment. 110.28, dollar index 98.43, Japanese yen 106.91, Swiss franc 0.9889, the pound 122.61, the Aussie, let's have a look at that, 0.6857, that's bounced from below 67. Indian rupee 71.69, South Korean won 1191.95, Brazilian real 406.34, Egyptian pound 16.4975, and the rand again that hit 15.50, and Bosch were at 14.79. Dollar index, this is a 3-month chart. I still think we're going to chug higher towards 100 euro dollar. This is a chart from T Commodity. T Commodity thinks that the euro is going to surprise to the upside here, that expectations are going to be dashed. 2019 returns Bitcoin 180%, Zeros 34%, REITs 27%, Nasdaq 25%, oil 22%, S&P 20%, gold 17%. So interesting returns. Have a look at that. That's on Rich Wrap-Ups. Commodity returns, palladium 29%, WTI crude 25%, and that's been strong this morning on the news of the reshuffle in the Saudi oil ministry. Gasoline 21%, platinum 20%, gold 18%, silver 17%, Brent crude 14%, heating oil 13%, lumber 5%. Worst performer, cotton minus 18%. Gold, this is a chart from Holger, last at 1508.75. Silver, this chart's from Joe Friday. Silver is gold on steroids, had a very big move in the last few weeks. Crude oil, last trading at $57.09. Sub-Saharan Africa, this was my article over the weekend, was about Mugabe. Robert Gabriel Mugabe, who had previously opined thus on the occasion of his 88th birthday, "I have died many times. That's where I have beaten Christ. Christ died once and resurrected once." Died in a Singapore hospital. Peter Bukert of HRW said of him, "He was the liberation hero of an era, a poster child for American liberation." Bob Marley played at his inauguration in 1980. Mugabe was without doubt erudite and an intellectual. According to Simon Allison of the Mail and Guardian, Mugabe's secret was that he was always the cleverest person in the room. One of his biographers, Blair, argued that Mugabe shared many character traits with Ian Smith, stating that they were both proud, brave, stubborn, charismatic, deluded fantasists. According to the Black Scholar Journal, depending on who you listen to, Mugabe is either one of the world's great tyrants or a fearless nationalist who has incurred the wrath of the West. Morgan Chandler, I said, he is on the one hand the man who liberated our country from the white colonialists, and he is also this man who has murdered and repressed in a dictatorial manner. I say he is the founding father of Zimbabwe, and the problem we have is to save the positive side of his contribution to this country and to let history judge his negative contributions, he added. For me, I find it quite profound that he is quite an old man who has mismanaged his own succession. Mario Vargas Llosa, in his book The Neighborhood, which was a book about Peru in the time of President Fujimori, and then the Dr. Vladimiro Montesinos, wrote, "Something bigger than you and me, power. You don't fool around with power, my friend," which I would argue was a common and overarching thread of Mugabe's 37 years of leadership. After assuming power, he moved fast to create a de facto one-party state in the early 1980s. He suppressed the Ndebele rebellion in Matabeleland with great brutality. He unleashed the war veterans on the white farmers when Tony Blair's Labour government reneged on promises to provide funds to buy out those same farmers. Of course, neither the white farmers nor Tony Blair nor the MDC overthrew him, but in a Shakespeare-level outcome, it was his trusted lieutenant, Emerson Mnangagwa, who removed the plug from the socket of political power, Alex T. Magaisa. I've not got the space to dive further into the psychology of the man or the influence of his second wife, Gucci Grace, who actually should have been called Ferragamo Grace because she said her narrow feet meant she could only wear Ferragamo shoes. Jonathan Moyo said, and meanwhile the people forgot the vision of the liberation struggle. The people were saying, what good is liberation without food? And this is the point. Mugabe started well, but then presided over the immiseration of his country. GDP per capita has shrunk by a third since the 1980s. Today, Zimbabwe is the region's basket case, and this is a country with a literacy rate of 85%. In the top quintile of sub-Saharan African countries, more than 3 million Zimbabweans have fled, and that's about 1 in 5 Zimbabweans. Zimbabwe is ranked 45th among 47 countries of the sub-Saharan African region. The economy has crashed and burned, not once but repeatedly. Inflation, whilst not hitting the levels we saw in 2008, is flying off the charts again. This is an economy which was the breadbasket of the region. Most of Zimbabwe's citizens are born free. The fight for independence was real, but is no longer relevant, is it? We are grateful to all those iconic leaders who liberated our continent, of which Mugabe is one, but at what price? Fighting for independence is not the same as building an economy which provides opportunity for all its citizens. As some African leaders laud Mugabe today, Pastor Evan Live argues there can be no mixed feelings, misconceptions, or complications about Robert Mugabe's legacy. He presided over the destruction of millions of people's lives over a span of 37 years. Emerson Mnangagwa, who is eulogizing Mugabe as a revolutionary icon, has failed and is frankly as untenable as his erstwhile mentor. This is an enormously rich country. My wife, who comes from Blantyre, described to me how when she was young, driving to Harare was like visiting the first world. The human capital is seriously talented. It's time to boom the economy. It's not rocket science. I then went back to an old article in the New Yorker by John Lee Anderson, The Destroyer, Robert Mugabe and the Destruction of Zimbabwe. 900 years ago, at a site on a high plateau north of the Limpopo River called Great Zimbabwe, Shona kings built stone palaces where they lived in splendid isolation from their subjects, with absolute authority over their means to sustain life, cattle herds, land, and the gold that came out of the earth. In the 1960s, members of the liberation movement in what was then Rhodesia, among them Robert Mugabe, adopted Great Zimbabwe's name to refer to the notional state they were fighting for. Saying that this is written in 208, Mugabe can be said to be the owner of the riches that remain in the nation of Zimbabwe. Tsvangirai, of course, had won a slender majority in the country's first round of voting in March, dropped out of the race and went into hiding. In the runoff vote on June 27th, Mugabe was unopposed and was quickly declared the winner. Then talking about the inflation rate, which reached 11 million%, the highest in the world, and then got as high as 235 million%. And then interviewed Leo Mugabe, who was a nephew of the president, who said, we've taken the land, so what is the next move? The next move is the mines, the minerals. We know that we are very rich without the British or the Americans. Yes, they invested, but if we have to, we will go and take over the mines, which of course they did, and not very successfully. He was the liberation hero of an era, a poster child for African liberation. Peter Bukert, the Emergencies Director of Human Rights Watch. That's the tragedy of what's happened here. But this is a visit that was done some time ago. The price for a half-litre bottle of Johnny Walker was $1.9 trillion, 19 US dollars. City was plastered with campaign posters of Mugabe in a defiant pose, one fist raised, bearing the slogan, the final battle for total control. Go back to Mario Vargas Llosa, don't mess around with power, my friend. then talking about Grace Mugabe. Mugabe, very educated, I think he had about 7 degrees, the cleverest man in the room, as Simon Allison said about him, but very similar in a strange way to Ian Smith. A lot of his unhappiness, he was married before to Sally, they had a boy of 3, the boy died of malaria, and Mugabe was not allowed by Ian Smith to go and bury his son. Land issue did not go away. Blair in the 90s refused to continue subsidising Zimbabwe's land reform. Then you had the farm seizure policy that was disastrous for practically just about everybody. Another interesting article by Simon Allison, who really has written some very good stuff in the Mail and Guardian, saying that it started off as a revolutionary, the people's votes and the people's guns are always inseparable. That was 1976. Secret was that he was always the cleverest person in the room. Then he became the statesman. Cricket civilises people and creates good gentlemen. I want everyone to play cricket in Zimbabwe. I want ours to be a nation of gentlemen. Then, of course, he went after the Ndebele, the Shona were the healthy seeds to be nurtured, while the Ndebele needed to be washed away. To do the washing, Mugabe deployed his North Korean trained 5th Brigade. Over the course of 5 years, between 83 and 87, they purged dissidents. It was quite horrendous, and in Act 3, really, he was the dictator. Very interesting article in the New York Times. We're at war. A covert social media campaign boosts military rulers. In June, an obscure digital marketing company in Cairo began deploying keyboard warriors to a second front, a covert operation to praise Sudan's military on social media. Internet warfare, paying new recruits $180 a month to write pro-military messages using fake accounts on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram and Telegram. Covert influence campaigns have become a favorite tool of leaders in countries like China and Russia, where manipulation of social media complements strong-arm tactics on the streets. Companies use money, deception, fake accounts to leverage their audience of almost 14 million Facebook followers, as well as thousands more on Instagram. That's supporting essentially Hemeti in Sudan. Also supported Khalifa Haftar, who counts Egypt and UAE amongst his staunchest allies. Facebook declined to act because the RSF had become a state actor. But then they identified the tweets as fake through Arabic language ticks that suggested they'd been written by non-Sudanese. Saying from 2011 onward, it's been a war of social media. The bigger the lie, the more people will believe it. This is a photograph of the protesters on the streets of Khartoum on June 3rd, 2019, the day that soldiers massacred dozens demonstrating in favour of civilian rule. I've written about Khartoum several times. 29th of July, the Oud Spring, I called it. 10th of June, I said the zeitgeist of the revolution in Khartoum was intoxicating. As I watched events unfold, it felt like Sudan was a portal into a whole new normal. I also talked about Hugh Masekela, who said, I want to be there when the people start to turn it around. And I said, Sudan is a Hugh Masekela pivot moment. The advent of the internet created the conditions for cross-border, near instantaneous, peer-to-peer human communication for the first time in history. That's a really important point to consider. And what it meant is that the world suddenly had the power to create its own narratives. Jump to Paul Virilio, the vectors of communication call into being a whole new geopolitics, not of territories and borders, but of communication and computational infrastructure. September 2012, I was talking about one of the defining bifurcations of the future will be the conflict between information masters and information victims. Information warfare will not be couched in the rationale of geopolitics, but will be spawned like any Hollywood drama out of raw emotions, hatred, jealousy, greed, Emotions rather than strategy will set the terms of information warfare struggles. Facebook has represented itself as an intermediary, but has been hawking our information as if it were an intermediary. This is its trust gap. Fabulous article again by Sam and Allison at Mail and Guardian, how big data and lessons from Obama swung Senegal's presidential election. And this is referencing a chap called Umar Ba, who worked with President Obama in 2008. In 2018, Ba found himself working on another campaign on another continent. And this is Senegal's election, in which Macky Sall won. Ba's unit recorded dozens of data points on 3.5 million people. Analysts crunched the numbers through sophisticated algorithms, ultimately coming up with a unique campaign strategy for each county. Very interesting, worth reading that in full. Ethiopia should slowly liberalise its exchange rate regime, but moving to a fully floating rate for the bear currency is unlikely over the next 3 years, its central bank governor told Reuters on Friday. Unlikely to happen anytime soon, but take you back to something I wrote in July 2018, Ethiopia Rising, and how the Prime Minister announced his economic pivot, and he continues to make ground on that front. The truth is, when the violence subsides, we'll be left with the bare bones of reality, a failing government with a leadership vacuum and non-existent jobs in a motionless economy. Dollar rand 14.799, big rebound in the rand. Egyptian pound 16.4980. This is fascinating. He reportedly treated more than 6 million people with this miracle cure. But how many of Babu's patients survived to narrate the Loliondo trip? This is somebody that Vasanji had written about. Babu, grandfather of Loliondo, claims to cure all illnesses, including AIDS and cancer, with his herbal potion. Hundreds, if not thousands, go to see him every day in hired minibuses. From as far away as near in Kenya, the queues waiting for him are claimed to be miles long. And this is Vasanji, who I interviewed, and that link is there as well. He's a fabulous writer. Kenya yield on the 2018 10-year and 30-year Euro bond is at 6.3% and 7.7% respectively. It's a little bit of a rebound price, lower yields. Yields on the 7-year Euro bond at 6%, while the 12-year Euro bond is at 7%. Knight Frank put out a Kenya economic update, very interesting. Slowdown in the real estate sector, which is mainly due to the current oversupply, low transactions and the interest rate cap. Stanley Fahari IREIT, its price is 54% lower than its initial listing price. Home Africa, 95% lower than its initial listing price. Talking about the KMRC as well in this report, but giving a lot of flavour as to the real estate market. Major hotel developments in the pipeline include Radisson Blu, Hotel and Apartments in Arboretum by Carlson Residor, Alba Hotel in Lavington, Nairobi, Azure, Best Western at Signature Mall. Pullman, which was expected to open in 2018, but this was in April, pushed to the second half of 2019. 12-month cumulative inflows to July 2019 increased to $2.778 billion from $2.501 billion in the 12 months through July 2018, plus 11.1%. However, the figure for July 2019 was a 4-month low. On a year-to-date basis, the shilling has depreciated by 2% against the dollar, in comparison to a 1.3% appreciation in 2018. Market is currently trading at a PE ratio of 11 and a dividend yield of 5.5. If you're interested in diving into any share, that link is the last link on Rich Wrap-Ups. Thank you for stopping by. I'm always grateful. Wishing you a great week.